Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk Mini Edition. This is the place where I give you those quick, no-filler reviews of films I've been watching recently. I'm your host Josh, and since it is now Valentine's Day, I figured why not celebrate the season of love the real way, with pickaxes, gas masks, and a whole lot of heart. Literally. That's right, today I want to talk about 1981's slasher classic, My Bloody Valentine. Now, it may not have the household name recognition of Halloween or Friday the 13th, but ask any hardcore horror fan and they'll tell you, this one is still special. Over the years, it has built a dedicated cult following, and after my most recent rewatch, I definitely can see why. You have a small mining town, a tragic backstory, and a mysterious killer in full mining gear, hunting down anyone who dares to celebrate Valentine's Day. It's a simple setup, but what really makes this one stand out is its atmosphere. Because of those dark, claustrophobic tunnels, the eerie gas mask breathing, and some really, actually pretty gnarly kills that push the limits of early 80s gore. So, does My Bloody Valentine hold up? Is it a hidden gem? Or is it just another slasher lost in the decade of masked killers? Let's dig in, because this one definitely gets a little bloody. So let's begin by setting the scene. Valentine Bluffs. It's your typical small working class town. The kind of place where everyone knows each other and traditions run deep. But this town has a dark past, and it all started in the mines. Years ago, on the night of the town's big Valentine's Day dance, a terrible accident occurred. A group of miners were trapped underground when their supervisors, too busy enjoying the festivities, failed to check safety protocols. By the time rescuers reached them, only one man had survived, Harry Warden. But survival came at a cost. He had gone mad, forced to cannibalize his fellow workers to stay alive. After being institutionalized for a year, Harry escaped, still wearing his black miner gear and eerie gas mask, and went on a blood-soaked revenge spree, brutally murdering those he held responsible. And when the carnage was over, he left the town with a chilling warning. Never throw another Valentine's Day dance again, or else. Now we fast forward 20 years and, well, small towns have short memories. The old horror stories have faded and a new generation wants to bring back the tradition. The mayor and local sheriff are uneasy, but the young folks couldn't care less. They just want a good time, music, drinks, and maybe find a little romance. But the past doesn't stay buried for long. As soon as the dance is announced, gruesome murders begin to happen. Each one more brutal than the last. The victims aren't just dying, they're being picked off in ways that only a miner with a serious grudge would know how to do. And to make things even creepier, the town's leaders keep finding blood-soaked candy boxes with real human hearts inside, a twisted message from a killer who clearly isn't finished. So the big question is, has Harry Warden come back to make good on his promise, or is someone else hiding behind that gas mask using his legend as a cover? That's our setup for My Bloody Valentine. It's a 1981 slasher flick. It's directed by George Mahalka, right in the middle of that original golden age of slasher film run. Now, franchises like Friday the 13th and Halloween dominate the horror scene, but My Bloody Valentine took a different approach. It traded in those usual cabins and suburban houses for a more gritty, industrial setting. It used the underground mine shafts to create an atmosphere that was dark, claustrophobic, and genuinely creepy. Then there's the killer himself. The miner's uniform, that helmet, the heavy rhythmic breathing through the gas mask. It's such a simple design, but it really works. I think there's something unnerving about that faceless, blacked out mask lurking in the shadows. And when the pickaxe comes down, it always comes down hard. So with all that set up, the real question is, does it hold up? Well, let's take a look at what works and what doesn't. So here's the thing about My Bloody Valentine. This is not the best slasher of all time, but it is still really interesting. The concept alone is probably the best part of the whole movie. A Valentine's Day themed horror movie set in a mining town, complete with an industrial setting and a creepy killer in full work gear. That really is a great hook. And the film makes some good use of that setting. Most slasher films, they take place in more familiar locations, especially at this time, summer camp, suburban neighborhoods, eventually abandoned asylums, hospitals, things like that. My Bloody Valentine does something different, though, by dropping its victims into dark, winding mine tunnels. That's a place that already feels dangerous before you add like a pickaxe-wielding maniac into the mix. I mean, can you just imagine being trapped hundreds of feet underground, surrounded by unstable walls and nothing but the dim glow of a helmet lamp cutting through the shadows? Every step echoes, every sound amplified, and then add in something coming after you? I mean, good luck. You're not escaping through the woods in this one. You're stuck with nowhere to go but actually deeper into the dark. It's a really brilliant setting, and honestly, more horror movies should take advantages of environments like this one. And then there's the kills. If you're watching the theatrical cut, you might find them a little tame, but if you can somehow get your hands on the uncut version, that's where this movie really shines. Because some of the kills are pretty brutal. There's pickaxes to the face, people impaled on mining tools, hearts ripped out and stuffed into candy boxes like the worst Valentine's Day gift you can imagine. It's all early 80s practical effects goodness. It's got that raw, messy gore that feels so much more real than our modern CGI blood. You see the aftermath, and the violence actually kind of sticks around in a way that makes it feel impactful. And we have to talk about the killer. The idea of the Harry Warden, it's not as famous as Freddy or Jason, but his look. The look is iconic. I think most horror fans, even if you don't know the movie, recognize that mining gear, the heavy black uniform and the hard hat, and the gas mask. It's very simple, but it's incredibly effective. I mean, the gas mask alone makes him unsettling. It doesn't allow for any facial expressions like in Friday the 13th and Halloween. There's no emotions. Just in this case, it's just that eerie mechanical breathing that fills the silence. And the pickaxe, it's not a quick, clean weapon like a knife. It's really heavy, it's brutal and messy. You feel it when he swings that thing. It's really a great design for a slasher villain, and it's a shame we never got a proper sequel to build on that idea. Now, as much fun as this movie can be, it is far from perfect, and honestly, in some places, it's kind of downright a mess. Starting with the pacing. For a movie about vengeful, pickaxe-wielding miner hunting people down, you'd think it would keep up a good momentum. But instead, we spend a big chunk of the movie watching this boring love triangle between our main characters, TJ, Sarah, and Axel. TJ is this guy who left town only to come crawling back and expect everything was going to be the same. And Axel is the guy who stuck around. He started dating Sarah while TJ was gone. And Sarah, she's just kind of caught in the middle, listening to those two whine and throw these stupid, jealous temper tantrums like a bunch of teenagers. It's supposed to add emotional weight, but it really just kills the energy. You're just sitting there thinking, guys, there's a literal psycho miner loose in town. Maybe focus on that instead of your stupid high school relationship drama. And there's the actors, or the acting itself. And now I don't get me wrong, I do not expect Oscar-worthy performances in an early 80s slasher, but I mean, at least give me characters I enjoy watching. Some of the cast, they're fine, but others feel like they're reading their lines for the first time. Some of the more emotional moments, especially involving any romantic tension, feel straight out of like a bad soap opera. The delivery is so dramatic and forced, it's actually ends up being kind of funny. But the biggest issue is the killer reveal. It's really, really bad. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it outright, but let's just say when the big moment happens, it's not the shocking twist the movie thinks it is. Instead, it's confusing, rushed, and full of plot holes throughout the movie. I mean, throughout the entire film, we get these hints that the legendary Harry Warden might be back, which is cool. The idea of a vengeful miner returning to punish the town for breaking his warning. That is a solid slasher setup. But the actual reveal just feels like they just threw it together at the last minute. Like, oh, we're running out of film, we need to wrap this thing up. And there's barely any build up to it. And when the truth comes out, you're left thinking like, well, that's all we get? It's kind of one of those endings where you start replaying earlier scenes in your head and trying to figure out how this even makes sense. Spoiler alert, it doesn't really make sense. And the final act is a little weak. The movie spends so much time really setting up this legend, the town's fear, and the idea that no one's safe. But when we finally get to the climax, it just doesn't hit as hard as it should. I mean, the tension is there, but it never reaches that next level the way its contemporaries Halloween and Friday the 13th actually do. And then the movie ends. Abruptly, boom, it's over, go home. There's no real satisfying resolution, just that weird rush finale that leaves you with more questions than answers, and not the good kind of questions. So yeah, while My Bloody Valentine does have some stuff going for it, it's got some cool kills, a creepy setting, and a really good villain design. It has a lot of sloppy storytelling, awkward acting, and a pacing that just, it falls apart in all the wrong places. Now, it's still a fun watch, but if you're looking for a well-crafted horror mystery, this isn't your movie. So when it comes right down to it, My Bloody Valentine is one of those slasher films that doesn't always get the love it deserves, but it's got a lot to offer if you're in the right mood for it. The atmosphere is what really sets the movie apart. It's got that gritty industrial feel, which gives it a completely different vibe than the usual cabin in the woods or suburban nightmare settings we see in other 80s slashers. I mean, the mining town with its creepy tunnels and claustrophobic vibes, just it ramps up the tension in a way that's really effective. At that point, you're really feeling the movie. You're trapped in the dark with the masked killer and wondering if you're going to make it out alive. And again, the kills, that's the biggest appeal of a slasher movie. And if you're lucky enough to get that uncut version, you're in for some seriously brutal, over-the-top moments. It's really well done. But all that said, it's not perfect. It's the bad pacing, the awkward love triangle subplot and everything. But with all of that said, this movie is kind of an underdog slasher. It has a lot of heart and blood, and it's one of those films that maybe you can overlook the cringiness of the pacing, the acting, and all of that, and get a lot of fun out of it. I mean, it's a 5 out of 10. It's not going to make your top tier horror list. But if you like 80s slasher vibes and you want something a little different, something that might put a different spin on that usual formula, then it's a solid pick. Plus, for me, it absolutely beats the 2009 remake. That one focused too much on gimmicky 3D effects, and it lacked that real feel of the original. So for me, the original My Bloody Valentine is still the one to beat. Again, 5 out of 10. It's that kind of movie that around Valentine's Day, you got a cold, rainy day and you don't want to do much, throw this on and have some fun with it. But that's going to do it for this quick dive into My Bloody Valentine on this mini edition of Real Talk. I got to ask though, have you seen this one? Is it a hidden gem you think deserves more love, or is this just another slasher buried in the sea of 80s horror? I really want to know what you think about it, especially if you've been able to see the uncut version. Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment or hit me up on social media. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Real Talk. Email therealrealtalk@gmail.com. We'd love to talk with you all. And subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps the show. And so if you are a fan of Real Talk, the main channel, keep watching. We got a new series coming up next week where I'm going to start going over some of my favorite top 10s. The first will be top 10 underrated films, followed by soundtracks, directorial debuts, animated movies, movie villains, and then we're going to dive into, for March and Women's History Month, we're going to look at coming-of-age films directed by women. Over on the horror channel, we are in the back end of our John Carpenter series. As soon as we finish up with our John Carpenter series, we're going to move on and take a look at the films of Rob Zombie. And then after that, we have a nice little deep dive into psychological horror. Keep an eye out for all of those. It's going to be a lot of fun. Our next episode, actually, on the horror edition is going to be on John Carpenter's remake, Village of the Damned. So check that one out. And but for me today, folks, that's it. I'm going to go enjoy my Valentine's Day with my wife and hopefully get this podcast up and out to y'all soon. Enjoy your holiday. Keep it real. And thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.
Underneath the silver screen, gleam, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold. Gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets in moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, real by real.